The ballroom shimmered with gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting light across polished marble floors. Waiters in white gloves moved silently between tables, serving drinks that cost more than most people's weekly salaries. It was the kind of place my father loved, where wealth wasn't just present, it was displayed. "Stay confident," he told my older brother as we walked in. "People here respect success. Your one click can keep these stories alive. Subscribe, because every voice deserves to be heard. Don't miss out on the journey. Subscribe and let's grow, laugh, and learn together." Then he glanced at me. "And try not to look out of place." I looked down at my outfit. Simple, clean, nothing flashy. To me, it was enough. To him, it was a problem. We checked in and moved into the main hall. Conversations filled the air. Talk of investments, mergers, profits. My father was already scanning the room, looking for the right people to approach. "This is where connections matter," he said. "One conversation can change everything." My brother nodded eagerly. He had followed my father into finance, built a respectable career, and fit perfectly into this world. Then there was me, the one who didn't talk much about work, the one who didn't explain, the one they assumed had nothing worth mentioning. We approached a group of well-dressed guests. My father introduced himself smoothly, mentioned my brother's position within seconds. Then, almost as an afterthought, he gestured toward me. "And this is my daughter." A polite pause. "What do you do?" one of the men asked. Before I could answer, my father chuckled. "She's still figuring things out." My brother added, "She's not really into finance." The group smiled politely. Translation, not important. The conversation shifted away from me almost immediately. Later, as we moved toward our table, my father leaned closer to another guest and said quietly, but not quietly enough, "You see people like her everywhere at events like this." He nodded in my direction. "They come for the free food, take pictures, try to look like they belong." The man laughed awkwardly. My father smirked. Basically, beggars in nice clothes. My brother laughed too. I didn't react. There was no point, because in my father's world, value had to be visible. Expensive suits, luxury watches, recognizable titles. Anything else didn't count. We sat down. The program began shortly after. A major banking executive was scheduled to speak about a new international expansion. My father leaned forward. "Pay attention," he whispered to my brother. "This is real power." The CEO walked onto the stage. Confident, calm, respected. The room quieted immediately. He began speaking about growth strategies, global markets, and the future of banking. Everything my father admired. Halfway through his speech, he paused. His eyes moved across the audience. Then he smiled slightly. "Well," he said into the microphone, "I wasn't expecting to see her sitting all the way back there." The room stirred. People turned, trying to figure out who he meant. My father frowned. Who is he talking about? The CEO stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he continued, "I'd like to recognize someone very important to our organization." My brother leaned closer, probably a major investor. Then the CEO raised his hand and pointed directly at our table, at me. My father's expression shifted. "That can't be right," he muttered. But then the CEO said something that made the entire room go silent. "She's not just an investor." He looked straight at me. "She's the owner of the bank." For a second, no one moved. My father blinked, as if he had heard something wrong. "The owner?" he repeated quietly. The CEO nodded calmly. "Yes." He kept his eyes on me. "Would you mind joining me on stage?" Whispers spread instantly across the ballroom. My brother turned toward me slowly. "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood up. Chairs shifted around me as guests made space, their attention now completely focused. The same people who had ignored me minutes ago were now watching every step. As I walked toward the stage, I could hear fragments of conversations. That's her? No way. She owns the bank. The CEO greeted me with a firm handshake. Good to see you, he said. You too, I replied. He turned back to the audience. For those unfamiliar, he began, this is the majority owner behind our entire banking group. A ripple of shock moved through the room. At my table, my father sat frozen. My brother leaned forward, his confident expression completely gone. The CEO continued. She acquired controlling interest 5 years ago and has since led our international expansion. More murmurs. Under her leadership, we've entered 3 new global markets and doubled our asset base. A few executives in the front rows nodded in recognition. Then he added, and as of this year, she is officially our largest shareholder. That was the moment it fully registered, because in a room like this, everyone understood what that meant. Power, control, authority. My father slowly shook his head. That's not possible, he whispered. But the CEO wasn't finished. He glanced toward my table. I believe her family is here tonight. My father stiffened in his chair. The CEO smiled slightly. You must be very proud. No one at the table spoke, because just minutes earlier, he had called me a beggar. The CEO handed me the microphone. Would you like to say something? He asked. I looked out at the room. Hundreds of faces. Watching. Waiting. Then I spoke. I've learned something over the years, I said calmly. The room quieted instantly. That real value isn't always visible. A few people nodded. Sometimes the person you underestimate. I paused briefly. Is the one holding everything together. Silence. Then applause. Louder this time. More genuine. I handed the microphone back and stepped away from the stage. As I walked down, several executives approached me. Impressive growth strategy. We should discuss partnerships. Your expansion timing was incredible. I acknowledged them politely and continued walking, back to the same table, where everything had just changed. I reached the table. No one spoke. My father looked at me like he was trying to understand who I was for the first time. You own the bank, he asked slowly. Majority stake, I replied. My brother shook his head. All this time, you never said anything. I pulled out my chair and sat down calmly. I said, they both went quiet because they remembered the jokes, the interruptions, the way every conversation about my work had been dismissed before it even began. My father looked down at the table. I thought you had nothing, he said quietly. I glanced around the ballroom. People were still looking at us, watching, whispering. Then I looked back at him. You saw what you wanted to see, I said. Silence settled over the table again. My brother leaned back in his chair. That CEO, he works for you? He asked. In a way, I said. Another pause. Everything that had seemed so clear to them before was now completely different. The labels they had used, the assumptions they had made, none of them fit anymore. For the first time in years, my father had nothing to add. No advice, no judgment, just quiet realization, because the daughter he called a beggar was the one who owned the room. My father finally spoke. I was wrong, he said quietly. I nodded, not out of victory, just acceptance. The room around us buzzed with respect now, the same place where I had been invisible minutes earlier. I stood up. You didn't see my worth, I said calmly. You only saw what I didn't show. No one stopped me as I walked away, because the beggar they laughed at was the one who owned everything they admired.